in the preliminary plan, there was an included savings on the city's asylum seeker response, including a $1.09 billion in fiscal year 25 and $1.34 billion in fiscal year 26 and $400 million in fiscal year 27. How were these savings achieved, and how much of the savings reflected were due to shelter time limits?
It's savings basically is a result of the number of people exiting the system. As I said in my testimony, at the peak, we were about 69,000. So we budgeted for a growing population. And since the implementation of the 30-day, 60-day policies and the implement of the Biden policy last June, we see a substantial decline in the population. So as more people leave the system, we begin to consolidate sites. As we consolidate sites, we begin savings. We renegotiated many of the contracts. So it's not just one policy. I cannot tell you one particular policy, how much we generated from it.
Was most of it due to contract renegotiations? Because I know there were issues in the beginning.
Contract renegotiation, but also people exiting the system.
Okay.
We're down to from 69,000 to about 43,000 now. Okay. So we were taking care of fewer people. Mm-hmm. Okay. So obviously we're consolidating the sites, we're closing sites. As you're closing sites, you're saving resources. So this is the process that we're going through right now.
Yeah. How does that because we're seeing a trend, we're trending downward on asylum seeker housing needs, but we're also seeing an increase in the number of New Yorkers in shelter needing to be placed. How does that, impact the budget?
Well, that's the challenge we're having. This is a piece that at some point we're going to have some discussions about the growing census that we see in the shelter, non-asylum seeker shelter population. So a lot of people coming, used to be in the system before, left New York, came back to New York, get back into the system again. So this is one issue. We have the issue of city FEPS. That program is the project is going to be like $1.1 billion. This is 2 years ago, it was about $400 million.
Yeah.
So, it is. So at the same time, the population in the shelter is growing. The number of people in the voucher is also growing, record high.
Yeah.
So it's like we're getting hit on both sides. So it's a lot of stress on the budget.
Yeah. How much more did we spend this fiscal year on regular DHS shelters with the increase in the population there in the census?
We have it yet. See if I have it here. I'll get back to you on the specific number.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Do you know what is the current per diem cost for asylum seekers?
What is it, Sheena? Is that about 300 something?
370 as of
as of January is about 370.
378?
370. And the reason why is because, as people leaving the system, and you're still paying for a lot of empty space. That's what we're consolidating the space as quickly as we can, because you have, you're paying for empty beds. Until you consolidate and close the place, you keep paying for those things. So therefore, the per diem goes up. Okay, but we're making significant progress in terms of the cost. It's just the empty beds that causing the per diem to increase.
We're paying for empty beds in spaces that are shutting down?
No, because before you shut them down, okay, let's say you have a contract for a month or 2 months or whatever left in the contract.
Okay, but
you're still paying for it. Okay, so that's skew. Okay, the per diem upward because you're paying for something when there is nobody in it. Okay, so you have to consolidate and close those places. As you go through that process, okay, the per diem increase, but the saving is there. Saving is real because you consolidate in the place, you're closing those places, and as a result, you're saving resources.
Do you know how many beds we have that are not being used at the time that we're paying for?
I can't give you a specific on a day-to-day basis because we go through the process of we try to consolidate as best as we can, as quickly as we can, so you could shut them down because that's how we did the savings.
Yeah. The preliminary plan includes $1 billion of state funding for the asylum seeker response efforts in both fiscal year 26 and 27, and $350 million in both fiscal years 28 and 29. The governor did not include this $2.7 billion in her executive budget, and she said that the cost sharing between the city and the state would not continue. Do you plan to replace the state funding with city funding in the executive budget?
We continue to work with the state, and we welcome your advocacy in Albany as well to help us, because these are, we have like 7 weeks to come up with $1 billion. You can imagine. As I said, while we're struggling with everything else, we're trying to protect programs, we're trying to find $1 billion to close the gap at the same time. So we continue to work with the state. We have conversation until the budget is enacted. We don't know what's going to happen, but again, as I said, we welcome your advocacy in Albany.
Yeah, we advocated as well. But would you say that the conversation is still ongoing with the state?
Conversation is still ongoing with the state.
Okay. Worst case scenario, how do we fill that gap?
Well, we're going to have to, again, as I said, looking at all the options that we have at our disposal to see what we can do to close the gap.
Okay.
But again, we're keeping our finger crossed, and we're pushing really hard on Albany to get resources. It may not be money is fungible from our perspective. It may not be asylum seeker resources, but if we could get other resources, so we're working with the state to see what can be done.
Okay. The rental assistance programs for HRA you just mentioned, for the past several fiscal years, actual spending on rental assistance program has been considerably higher than the baseline budget. As of the preliminary plan, the budget for all rental assistance programs is $1.3 billion in fiscal year 25, dropping to $635 million in fiscal year 26 and the out years. What is the city's current year-to-date expenditures on rental assistance, and how much of that was for city FEPs? And when will OMB increase the baseline budget for HRA's rental assistance program so that it more accurately reflects the current level of demand? I know we ask this every year, but I keep asking.
Again, this is the same issue of we're trying to monitor to make sure that the agencies monitor the budget, make sure that they implement the policies that's supposed to implement them, the rules that make sure. So therefore, we're trying to monitor as best as we can those resources. And as we go along, we make the appropriate adjustment of the budget to reflect the reality.
Yeah.
But again, it's an issue of cliffs.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of cliffs in the budget because we don't have a long-term funding stream for those things. So we have to, monitor them on a quarter-by-quarter basis and make the appropriate adjustment based on the actual population that we see using the vouchers.
Yeah, that's why we need to be pushing on the state and the federal government to fund subsidized housing, because this is a reflection of the number of New Yorkers that really cannot afford affordable housing. They need subsidized housing, which is completely different. HRA fair fares. In the fiscal year 2025 adopted budget, the eligibility for fair fares was expanded to include those making up to 145% of the federal poverty level. This expansion of eligibility became effective on January 7th. Funding for the program for this expansion was added in fiscal year 25 only. $10.8 million of new funding and $10 million in unspent funding rolled from the prior fiscal year in the preliminary plan for the budget for fair fares in fiscal year 25 is $117 million, decreasing to $96.3 million in 26 and the out years. The $20.8 million in additional funding needed for the expanded program has not been baseline. When will OMB add funding to increase the fair fares baseline budget?
At this moment in time, the program is, I believe, is well funded for fiscal year 2025. And as we go again to the budget cycle, we will see the needs and to see what can be done to adjust, reflect basically reality. Because at the end of the day, like you said, we basically roll some savings from because of the program has been underused or utilized. So we're going to see as the year, progress to see how much more, how many more people use the system, and we will adjust our budget to reflect the increased population. We're doing a lot of outreach. We have like $2 million in budget for outreach to make sure that people use the program. But again, as I said, as we move toward adoption, we'll review, and if there is a need, we will adjust the budget appropriately.
No, and I recognize that that's been true even in the city FEP's side, but it's a little bit, I imagine on your end as well, stressful to have to come back every single year and anticipate what, the new needs are going to be when the programs are kind of are fluid. They're fluid. But how many programs do we have in the city budget that are facing similar circumstances, that are funded but not fully funded based on, expense?
A lot
A lot?
on it.
Wow. Yeah, that's not good.
It's a lot of it. It is, as I said, it's a conversation we're going to have at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know now with the new rule, and that since the new rule change is in effect, what the city is doing so far in regards to outreach to ensure that eligible residents are aware of the change?
As I said, we have about $2 million in budget, and we have $2 million for outreach, and
We can get that.
well, we could provide you the detail, after the hearing, but we believe they're doing a lot of outreach with those resources to try to get folks to use the program.
Okay. Unspent funding from fiscal year 24 was rolled into 25 due to the time it took to implement last year's FPL increase. Given that this year's increase took even longer to implement, do you anticipate all budgeted funding in fiscal year 25 for fair fares will be expanded?
I don't know at this moment in time, but as I said, maybe at exec we'll have a better sense.
Okay. The Community Food Connections Program. In fiscal year 25, preliminaries budget response, the council called on the administration to baseline the budget for CFC at $60 million to help combat the high levels of food insecurity in the city, which persists today. Some funding was added to adoption for fiscal year 25, but it was not baselined in the out years, and approximately $39 million is still needed for fiscal year 26 and beyond. The preliminary plan includes $60 million in fiscal year 25 budget for CFC, but only $20.6 million in fiscal year 26 and the out years. Seeing as how this is a critical program for families in need, does OMB plan to add the funding for the program? And if so, when and how much?
Again, we will continue to work with you, and as we move toward adoption, if resources are available, we will make sure, because we don't want New Yorkers to go hungry. We share the same concern, and if resources are available, we'll make sure that the resources are there to fund the program.
Yeah, my food pantry lines are getting longer and longer, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's seeing that. They've never recovered post-pandemic, and with the current price of all basic necessities. It's gotten harder. I'll ask one more question, and then I'll yield to my colleagues. This is regarding the street homelessness program. Outreach and other programs geared towards the city unsheltered homelessness population has been a significant focus for DHS in recent years. When the mayor first announced the subway safety plan, $171.3 million was baselined for the program in fiscal year 2023's executive budget plan. After the mayor's recent State of the City announcement that these efforts would be expanded, the preliminary plan included adding an additional funding for DHS street homelessness program, $71.6 million in fiscal year 25, $116 million in 26, $123.5 in 27, $122.8 million in fiscal year 28, and $121.7 million in fiscal year 29. Despite the additional funding added 3 fiscal years ago, street homelessness and public transit safety concerns persist. The subway's safety plan seems to have had limited success. How is the city changing its approach, and will the new funding be used differently?
Yeah, based on the program, the way the program was designed, we added about $44 million in the baseline for with 900 additional safe haven and low barrier beds. We added $16 million in terms of 24/7, 365 outreach operations citywide, and $6 million for 100 additional runaway and homeless youth beds. And as you mentioned, we increased funding for the subway safety plan, basically to existing low barriers and robust street outreach. So that's where we are. It is. I think they're doing the best that they can in terms of particularly doing big outreach. We increased funding significantly for this, But again, we always welcome new ideas. If you have ideas, be more than happy to put you in touch with these folks because at the end of the day, we have the same objective, try to minimize homelessness as best as possible.
Absolutely. In the expansion of the subway safety plan, do you know how the OHMH, DHS, NYPD, and other city agencies coordinate their efforts?
I would probably have you talk with the folks at the mayor's, deputy mayors for health, and she could give you a briefing on exactly what they're doing and in terms of what's effect, because I don't know the detail of the operation.
Okay. Is the city expecting any additional support from the state that will impact DHS street homeless programs and the implementation of the city subway safety plan?
At this moment in time, I don't, we are not. I'm not aware of any conversation with the state in terms of state giving us additional resources for this. I mean, we had the whole public safety announcement in the subway, but not this kind of program. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.